Welcome to Breaking Banks. Welcome back to Breaking Banks. We are very happy to have the Lord Mayor of London join us for another show on Breaking Banks. It is the new Lord Mayor of London, Vincent Keaveny. Is that how I say it, Vincent?
Keaveny is how it's pronounced in the States, yeah.
Vincent Keaveny. So you took office on 13th of November, 2021. So let me first ask you, how does it feel to be Lord Mayor?
To say it's a pretty extraordinary office. I mean, it's 693rd Lord Mayor of London. I mean, it's if you thought about it too much, the history would sort of where it would overpower you. But it is great. That history is amazing. The first Lord Mayor in 1189, 692 people before me in the office. But so it's a great platform. But it is a platform from which we can look at what's going on today, but more importantly, thinking about tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. The history gives us a base from which to work. But we are more interested in tomorrow than that nearly 1,000-year-old history behind us.
Well, Lord Mayor, you do have a tough act to follow. I think William Russell, who preceded you, he did an excellent job in our field, which is the fintech arena. I am delighted, that you're coming back on the show as an office, and secondly, that fintech continues to be important for you. Maybe can I just ask, did you know much about the fintech space before you took office?
My professional background is as a capital markets banking and finance lawyer. So I had a fair bit of exposure in that to the tech sector, to fintech. It wasn't my primary area of practice, but operating as I co-chaired the financial services sector at my law firm for 3 or 4 years, running up to the point at which it was simply getting impossible to carry on that role and prepare for the mayoralty as well. And I've had a fair bit to do with the fintech sector, and my firm DLA Piper has a big practice in that area.
Oh, of course, I know DLA. So, and well done. I know you're in San Francisco right now. Of course, we're just coming off the back of the biggest year of fintech investment of any year in history. So big year for fintech last year. London continues to do well in respect to fintech. But what brings you to San Francisco this trip?
It's great. It's great connecting up our two fantastic hubs again, and it's connecting them up again. You mentioned William, my predecessor. William did a great job, as you said. He was out here in December 2019, and we haven't had a visit by a Lord Mayor since. So right. It's about time to get back here to start talking to the VC community face to face again. And the biggest thing that's coming out of this is just the energy and the enthusiasm that you get when you're back in a room again in person with people. I think we've all been missing that over the last couple of years, and meetings like the meetings I've had for the last 2 days just bring that home more than ever to me.
No doubt, COVID permitting, as we've said, right? So you're doing well to sort of get back into things. In the past, do you feel like that these visits, particularly given there's such a strong, VC fund base from Sand Hill Road and obviously in Palo Alto and San Francisco generally, do you feel like these visits result in hard capital flows of venture capital dollars to the UK fintech market?
We know they have. In previous years, when when we haven't had COVID to deal with, the Lord Mayors have tended to bring out a business delegation with them, and we can point. We have been able to. We've had some of the companies on those delegations coming back and saying, "Great, that was fantastic. We've just closed a funding round, and we've had a couple of the VCs we met out with you in Sand Hill Road joining those funding rounds." So we know it does have. We can track some of that. This year, I'm not able to take a business delegation with me. I think that would have just been a bit of a stretch given the COVID challenges, now the restrictions and the risks entail that traveling with a big party would have entailed. Would one of us have tested positive, for instance? I mean, all of that sort of stuff you've got to do these days. But I think we'll be tracking the meetings we have. We've got a lot of follow-up actions coming out of the meetings. A lot of the VCs will be over in London in coming months, looking at opportunities here in London. That is, and then they're also looking. They want to start meeting in person again, possible investment opportunities here in the Bay Area. So we're going to be bringing in making sure that we're connecting up potential investment opportunities and those VC investors over coming months. And there's a lot happening in London in coming months. We've got the Tech Week, Fintech Week, big events coming up over the next 6 months or so. So lots of opportunities to get those VC investors over to London, talking to potential fintech companies and entrepreneurs.
Now, obviously, last year was a big year for fintech, but
it's a huge year in London. Yeah, huge year in London. Great numbers. Yeah.
What are you seeing? For the start of the year in terms of activity in London, is it continuing strongly on, such as it did in 2021?
I think it has been a little. I suspect we'll look back and we'll see the slight slowing in over the very early part of this year. I think that's the little bit of market volatility, a bit of softening in the markets. I think again Omicron that did catch everybody.
Plus the crypto crash, right?
Well, there's one or two things like that have been on people's minds over the last month or so, and so I think we're working through that. And I mean, one of the interesting things is that a lot of the people I'm talking to have not been to London, have not been to the UK in over 2 years. There is a bit of a disconnect between what's happening on the ground in the UK and in Europe, and the perceptions here. And I think people traveling, people seeing in person what the story really is in London and the UK will, I think, kick-charge the investment cycle a bit later this year.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get back there in May, but not sure if it's going to happen, but hopefully.
I'd encourage you to go. I mean, you'll be surprised. London is feeling pretty normal at the moment, and we're certainly several months ahead of. It's interesting being here in San Francisco and finding it. It's quite conservative in comparison to the position in London.
Now, I know that the UK-US relationship has always been a strong one, but from an administrative perspective and from the perspective, I know the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has been a big supporter of fintech in the past. In fact, I had the opportunity to interview him when he was mayor of London previously, and fintech was a big part of his push even back then. But in terms of the current administration and sort of coming off the back of the pandemic, how is this reflected in respect to interest in the fintech area, particularly as an alliance feature?
Yeah, I think the government is very interested in it. We have a lot of support even on this trip. We've got the Department for International Trade team here in San Francisco supporting us on the trip. There's Lord Grimstone, the Minister for Investment in the UK. I was WhatsApping him only a few hours ago, keeping him updated on the progress of the visit and a couple of the meetings I've had where he may well follow up on one or two of those opportunities. So there's real. I mean, that is real ministerial interest directly in what's going on, and we've heard it from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak. There's a real commitment on the part of the government to encouraging the development of the tech sector and the fintech sector in the UK, and what I'm hoping, we're waiting to see the future financial services regulatory framework should be coming out shortly. And I would hope that there will be some positive aspects in there that will encourage the VC investment in the UK, that side of the equation, alongside the VC investor interest here on this side of the Atlantic in San Francisco. I think I'm hoping that we'll see some positive developments on that in the regulatory area in coming weeks.
Do you think that could tactically extend to, some common regulatory platforms? I mean, the FCA does a tremendous job in terms of their tech sprints and other elements. There's a lot of discussion about cryptocurrency right now, of course, the whole NFT thing and so forth. Given the speed with which the industry is moving, it would sort of make sense for some consensus-based regulation on a global basis in respect to some of these things. There's obviously an opportunity for the US and the UK to provide some leadership there, but is it too fragmented to expect that sort of policy development might come out of an alliance like this?
I think it's a big ask because of as you say, the fragmented nature of regulation across the world, and in this area, it gets complicated. There's a lot of big regulatory issues that need to be handled. But we are working. One of the things the City of London Corporation has been pushing for is closer regulatory understanding between the US and the UK. I think the term that's used over here in the States is deference, in the sense that we'd probably talk about mutual recognition on the UK side of the Atlantic. So we're not talking about effectively the same regulation or regulatory alignment, but we're talking about a recognition of broadly equivalent regimes. And if we can work towards more deference in the regulatory relationship between the two countries, I mean, that's going to be great for investment opportunities on both sides of the Atlantic. We don't need a big free trade agreement to get there. There's lots of other things we can do to short of a free trade agreement which covers services.
But, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud here, but it's something maybe you can have to think about for next time we talk. Part of what's happening in the financial services space, and given your background in capital markets, you'd understand this also, is that there's a high level of automation being applied to the space right now. Obviously, that's going to get fairly intense over the next few years. There's going to be a lot more artificial intelligence deployed. We don't really have much regulation on AI right now, and it doesn't apply just to financial services. Obviously, it has a broader, a much broader impact societally, potentially. China, we've seen quite a bit of development in respect to AI regulation more recently, but the US and UK have been a little slower. I would imagine there's some really interesting opportunities for more cooperation on a regulatory basis to, like we've seen with GDPR in respect to the big tech giants, and that sort of being a template for what's happening in respect to data in the US. I think there might be a possibility for the same in respect to AI and identity and some other areas. But anyway, I don't know what you think about that.
I think it would be great, and I think it is certainly. We are, as I said, the City of London, the corporation, and indeed working with a lot of the trade bodies operating in this area. It is something that we are keen to see happen. We are keen to see more of that, more coherent regulatory framework between the US and the UK, and we'll continue to push the regulators in the UK on that agenda. And I know that the FCA and others are aware of this. It is a challenge for them, but they're aware of this, and they've got a lot of very bright people at the FCA thinking about it at the moment. So we'll continue to push, and I'm sure that plenty of people listening to this on in the US will, I hope, do the same with the US regulators that they're in contact with.
I want to talk about green and ESG stuff, but just before I get to that, obviously the UK has been one of the leading players in respect to the challenger bank market as well. We have seen, just in December, we saw Nubank IPO, becoming the largest bank in the Brazilian market in the process, which is quite impressive for a bank that was founded in late 2013. And we've seen similar success with Starling and Monzo and others in the UK market. Any bets on who's going to be the first challenger to IPO in the UK market?
That's a really good one. Who'll I offend by by plumping? I mean, I won't name a name there, but I think there is.
Okay, that's sound. I think
the next big dinner match now, so they're bound to put me sitting beside the CEO of the one I didn't mention. So I'm going to be very careful there.
Yeah, but given the some very traditional banks and FIs in the London market, obviously Lloyds, HSBC, previously known as Midlands Bank, etc. But looking at that impact of the fact that N26 now is the second largest bank in the German market, Nubank is the largest bank in the Brazilian market. Is there sort of a grudging acceptance now that this neobank or challenger bank thing is real?
I think there is. I mean, I think there is, and I think that the established banks are trying to work out how to react to that and how to pivot in their own business models. And the likes of Starling and Monzo are making inroads. I mean, and they have different stories and different ways that their own business models are a little bit different, but they are now beginning to make real impacts on certainly amongst. Just looking at the, I've got a couple of them on my own phone.
I'm sure, Anne, you're going to be in touch with Anne Bowden.
I know Anne well. We got she's with my Irish background as well. Of course, she spent a number of years working in Dublin, so we have with something in common there as well. Yeah,
good. So on the green finance and sustainability side, obviously, we have seen increasing focus on this over the last few years. COP26, obviously, with their statements about coal in particular. This and we also saw the protests in the UK against HSBC and Barclays in particular. But in respect to sort of sustainability and the green finance stuff, where do you see your role in promoting the ESG side of things?
It's a big part of the role. Every Lord Mayor brings in a sort of personal focus into the year alongside the day job of being Lord Mayor, where you're the ambassadorial piece of the sector. And my theme for the year, my own personal focus for the year, people and purpose, investing in a better tomorrow. That has a big focus on the ESG agenda, particularly the S. Actually, I really wanted to broaden out. We've been talking a lot about the E over the last couple of years in the build up to COP26. So I wanted to bring the S piece into the center stage, talking about impact investing. And I'm working on an event, a summit focused on the S in ESG, impact investing, which will take place in London, in Mansion House in London in mid-July. But I haven't forgotten the E. There was going to be, I was very conscious of the fact coming into office on the last Friday, the day that COP26 was officially meant to end. I know it went on a couple of days. They didn't get to bed until, the early hours of Sunday morning or something like that. But I was very conscious taking office at that time that there was going to be a significant chunk of COP26 follow-up work to do, particularly around those commitments given through the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, that $130 trillion commitment to mobilize capital towards the transition to net zero. Huge. I mean, I think when we look back at COP26, that's going to be the thing that COP26 is remembered for, that extraordinary commitment. And the financial world is very conscious of the fact that it needs to, pretty much all the CEOs and chairs that I talk to at the moment are very conscious of the need to demonstrate progress on that over the next 12 months before COP27. And I think over the next couple of months, we'll be trying to demonstrate to the world that there has been some progress. So I think there's more work on that to come, that COP26 follow-up piece, potentially looking at something that will check in midway through the year between COP26 and COP27, just to see how well we're doing, what we're doing, making sure that there are steps that are being taken to see that mobilization of capital beginning.
No, I do think there's a bit of a generational shift there in terms of public support as well. Public support for big coal, big oil, those sort of things seems to be waning. And a lot more support coming through for renewables and sustainability and those messages. And essentially, I think what we're seeing is a shift where corporations are going to have to be good corporate citizens now. I think that's the emphasis of sort of where this shift that should take us, at least, hopefully does. But obviously there's some pretty big picture changes coming up in respect to policy. So one around ESG, that's going to continue to be stronger as the issues of climate change become more apparent. And the other thing is obviously, highly automated societies and the role that has to play on employment and the labour force. What sort of longer term planning does the Lord Mayor's office do in respect to those sorts of issues and how that might affect London?
City London Corporation has, of which I sit sort of at the head of the corporation, has been doing a lot of work around this agenda over the last couple of years. We'd been doing it in any event. I mean, there was plans thinking about what London would look like through to the 2030s. Those plans were already there. I think with the pandemic and the effect that that's had on cities generally, and in the City of London in particular, we've stepped back and actually begun to rethink our plans. And we've been looking at what London will offer by way of an outstanding environments to carry on business, a vibrant cultural offer, looking at those aspects of things to make sure that we've got a really attractive proposition in London for the workers, for the residents, for the visitors coming into the city. Because we're going to have to reinvent a lot of what we previously just took for granted. There's so much really positive stuff coming out of this. Just in the real estate area, for instance, last year, 2021, we granted about 4 million square feet of planning permission for office development in the city. That's up 70% on 2020. And a lot of those buildings are going to be absolutely world class in terms of the experience for people working in those buildings. And I think they'll also be, coming back to our previous point in the discussion, they're going to be hugely less carbon intensive. Their environmental footprint is going to be a fraction in many cases of smaller, older buildings that they're replacing. So I think there'll be great buildings to work in, and that they'll actually be far better buildings from an environmental point of view over the years to come. So we're going to really see, I think, an exciting city coming out of that. So we're doing a lot of thinking, Brett, to make sure we're ready for those changes.
Does the whole working from home movement, has that impacted the city at all?
Sadly, it's impacted a lot of the smaller businesses in the city. I mean, as you expect, the retail businesses that support the city, that the dry cleaners and newsagents and the sandwich shops, they've had a very hard time. And the city, we took steps over the last year and a half to try and protect them. We were able, through the amounts of the cash we had in our reserves, we put in place last summer. We put in place a £50 million scheme, a grant scheme, not loans, grants to small city businesses. And I know businesses in the ward that I represent in the city that were getting grants of 20,000, 30,000, right up to 100,000. And if you're a small business in the city, that grant has been a lifeline to keep them going. The offices, the big employers work. I think all the big employers, like my own firm, we're working out what a more flexible working pattern is going to mean. But I'm very I remain a sort of a bull about the office. I mean, I believe people will come back because of the benefits of people being in the same space together, the energy, the collaboration, the creativity that creates, and the training opportunities, particularly for junior lawyers. For instance, in my own area, the junior lawyers need to be getting that sort of in-person, hands-on training experience, seeing how to run deals, seeing what the dynamic of a meeting is like, and it's very difficult to replicate that online at the moment. Maybe in 20 years' time, the technology will be better, but at the moment, it just doesn't work.
So I know we've got to wrap up. We've got a few minutes, but just before we do, a couple of things. First of all, China, the Beijing Olympics. China has chosen to use the Beijing Olympic as a platform to trial their central bank digital currency, the yuan. I know just a few days before you started your term, the Reserve Bank came out talking about a possible CBDC. But any further thoughts on central bank digital currencies for London or for the UK more generally?
Well, we know the Bank of England is looking at it, and I'd be very encouraging of the central bank of the Bank of England to continue thinking about it. It would be great to see the UK taking a lead on that. Let's see, and I'm hoping that we'll see further positive developments on that, and indeed international competition, forcing the pace, that would be a good thing. Crypto assets would benefit from significant central bank involvement in that sector. That's my personal view.
And for the coming months, what are the plans for the Lord Mayor's office?
Well, we got a bunch of things going on. I'll be back on the road. I'm going to be over to my hometown, my original hometown, Dublin, in early March. Then I'll go off to the Gulf a little bit later in March, and got plans to visit India, plans to visit a number of the Southeast Asian countries in the coming months as well. So a fairly full program of travel, some big events in London. As I said, we'll probably be doing something around May with a COP26 focus. There's my Impact Summit in July, lots of other things coming up as well. And of course, in the middle of it all, I can't but mention the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. There's going to be a very special moment for me as Lord Mayor, greeting Her Majesty at the gates, at the doors of St. Paul's Cathedral for the service of Thanksgiving to celebrate her Platinum Jubilee. That will be walking up the aisle with the pearl sword in my arm before Her Majesty. That's going to be but once in a lifetime moment for me.
Absolutely. Once in many lifetimes, in fact. So congratulations on getting that gig. Well, Lord Mayor Vincent Keaveny, thank you very much for joining us on Breaking Banks. It's been a delightful update, and we wish you all the best with your visit in San Francisco, and we hope to speak to you from when you get back to the City of London once again in the coming months.
I'd love to do that and update you on the various things we've been talking to. But thank you very much, Brett, and great to have the opportunity to join you today.
Fantastic. Well, that's it. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after the break.
Well, it was hard to miss the news that rapper Razzlekhan, also known as Heather Morgan, and her husband Ilya Lichtenstein were arrested last week and accused of money laundering of some Bitcoin. Joining us today, Dave Birch. Dave, Heather Morgan is like you and like Ron Shevlin, well, at least a former, in her case, Forbes contributor. So
I think she probably has a fair few more followers than I do now. That's for sure.
Yeah. So Dave's here with us. We're going to talk about this and kind of the future face of fraud. So cryptocurrency, money laundering, but even beyond that. Dave, you wrote a piece in your Forbes column a few weeks ago now on what would John Dellinger do with instant payments. So we'll get into that at all. But let's start with the big headline: the rapper Razzlekhan. I don't think she made any money on her rap, as far as I can tell.
The rap video was pretty cool, though, I must say.
Well, I mean, she's probably going to have. Sorry, wait a minute. Let me stop that again. So say that about the rap video again, Brett.
The rap video was pretty cool, I have to say.
That's got to be the way forward for me. Is this, writing in Forbes is just the start. Rap videos.
I can see you rapping, dude. I could see that.
But
the guy. It's all right. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think two things about this, really. I mean, one is, it was weird because when this story broke, I'd actually been writing some stuff about some stuff to do with, with money laundering and criminality and this sort of thing. And then this big story broke. And I immediately started to think, Netflix must be down there with the checkbooks open, because what a great story for Netflix.
Well, they literally are. I don't know if that was, they literally have signed on to do a documentary for them.
I'm not surprised at all, because I can see, and people like that. So, it's huge. But here's what I thought. I don't know. Look, we're all really interested in reducing the overall cost of financial intermediation, right? So that's what this is all about. We're trying to make a better financial services sector. If you look at the costs of financial intermediation, any rudimentary examination of it will tell you that the costs of financial intermediation are going up, not down. We invented laser beams and computers and transistors, and it still costs more. The financial services sector costs more, extracts more than it did before. So we want it to go down. And one of the reasons why the costs are so high is because of KYC, AML, CTF, PEP. It's because of all these. So rethinking the way that we deal with crime, the bad guys, is fundamental. This is why I'm so interested in the whole RegTech thing as well as fintech. So this is why it's in context. This is why I'm thinking about all of this stuff. And I'm writing and I'm thinking, wow, there is going to be a problem with these crypto, because, if I was involved in some massive extortion against Brett involving assassination markets and
his rap videos,
which I would threaten to release to the public without substantial payments, I would come up with a scheme which involved, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the Bitcoin. I'm going to send the Bitcoin through a Russian dark drop, where they put the money in a box and you go pick it up. And then I'll convert that into Ethereum and I'll send that through the Tornado Cash mixer. And then what I got out of that, I'll turn it into Monero. And this is what I'm thinking, What actually happened? She bought a Walmart gift card and had the stuff shipped to her apartment in her real name. This is like, if you saw that in the movie, like if, you saw the master criminals and they've come up with this amazing scat. What was that thing? Remember they had the thing where they did the tricks at Las Vegas and they
not only that, but he had a
Ocean's
box.
11.
He had a box in his home which was marked burner phones. And
yeah, that's right. Don't put the burner phone in the box that says burner phone on it. This will be rudimentary. And now these strike me as being rookie errors, right? So, but you have to assume that the other people out there, since we're not reading about them, since they're not on the front page of the newspapers and all the websites, The other people getting away with I mean, you look at the figures for the amount of fraud going on, it's absolutely billions. So clearly the other people aren't buying Walmart gift cards with it and they're getting away with it. And the thing I think about this is that it's the automation which is interesting. So people have always stolen money for bank. And my point about John Dillinger. But when you start going into this kind of online DeFi world, you get these frauds which can be scaled. It's not like, the Italian, the good old fashioned bank robbery with the machine gun, or Michael Caine with his mini and the cash and all that sort of thing. This is stuff that scales. This is metaverse bank robbery, not universe bank robbery. This is replicatable bank robbery. And how we set about thinking about defenses there, I think is very fascinating. I'm an extremely boring person. So if you ask me where we should start, I will, of course, say we need to have a proper digital identity infrastructure, which we don't have at the moment. But that's just one part of it. But I don't know what you think, Brett. It's like, what fascinates me about this is bots. It's not people robbing banks, or it's bots robbing banks.
But here's the flaw with decentralization, isn't it? We're seeing this in real time, is that, when you have fraud and you want to get your untraceable anonymous money back, which is your meme that you've been tweeting on the last, 7-8 years. The reality is, if there's not an element of centralization, if there's not an element of acceptable traceability, and that really is around the identity, as you say. If we don't have that, then there's nothing to stop this from continuing to occur. So while decentralization of money is all well and good, and money networks is all well and good, when you lose money, that's the flaw in decentralized networks, right? Would you? I mean, is that? Maybe it's not as simple as that, but the ability to stop fraud and police crime is itself, a requirement for centralization in some respect, isn't it?
Well, let me muddy the waters by kind of dividing things into two sort of categories at the moment. So, for example, there's a court. I think it's still going on. There's a court case in Korea at the moment. So some people make some, whatever it was, I don't remember, token, decentralized exchange or something, using smart, I know they're not smart, contracts, I know they're not contracts, okay? And there's a mistake in the smart contract, as in fact there always is, okay? And so guy comes along, spots the mistake in the smart contract, and heads for the hills with a couple of $1 million. And the people who run this thing, instead of being like code is law, this is the future, we don't need no stinking badges, turn into a bunch of statist crybabies and go whining to the police about this. So the guy gets taken to court and he's charged with, fraud or something. And he says, I didn't do anything wrong. I just executed the code as you put up this code. I executed the code. The code did exactly what you told it to do. And I made, so I'm not giving you the money back. I didn't steal anything. I didn't do any fraud. I just ran the code that you put up there. And, he's kind of got a point. That's different from me coming round to Brett with a monkey wrench and smashing him over the head until he gives me the password of his Bitcoin wallet. That's fraud. By the way, did you hear this? What happened? My good friend Vincent Keaveny in the Netherlands. He was doing his podcast. And some guys with a gun. Swatted. Yeah, there's some thieves, broke in while he was doing his podcast. While he's
doing it, so I'm just going to make sure the door's locked. Hang on a second.
Yeah, they were threatening him for his Bitcoin. I mean, amazing, So I just want to say, so what interests me, I mean, there's the old-fashioned thing. I come around and smash Brett over the head, and I steal his Bitcoin wallet money, whatever. That's kind of old-fashioned crime. You know what I mean? It's like but what's
crime.
What's I think far more interesting is actual decentralized crime that belongs to that infrastructure. And here things get really complex. Good example. A couple of weeks ago, there was a fraud on OpenSea. You remember reading about this, the NFT marketplace. So somebody had figured out there was a mistake somewhere. So you could basically buy NFTs for their old price. So they went in, they bought these NFTs. So, the picture of the chimpanzee with sunglasses is now nominally worth $1 million, and they were buying it for $10 and then reselling it for $1 million. So, and there's a fantastic write-up on this by Tom Robinson at Elliptic, who is just a terrific story. And so they figure out this fraud. So they decide to email all of the people who still have these NFTs listed with these old prices. So, and tell them to do something about it. So the fraudsters, in order to do something about it, you have to execute an Ethereum transaction. So the fraudsters write a bot that front runs these transactions. So by trying to fix the problem, the problem becomes even worse because it's in a public blockchain, it's in a mempool where the front running is endemic anyway. So what I'm really curious about is how do we kind of begin to, like Brett said, like if we have this wholly decentralized environment, this is never going to end because there'll always be a bot versus bot war going on out there where people will come up with ever more complex frauds that are automatable and which makes them of a sort of different nature. So like I said, I'm a boring person, so I think we have to start with some kind of digital identity infrastructure, but I am really curious to hear about other ideas about what we can do with this. And I don't buy the, people saying, well, cryptocurrency is terrible for criminals because you've got the chain and you can trace the blockchain and all that, all of which is true. If you put your money into Walmart gift vouchers instead of Tornado Cash, or you
have to take it out of cryptocurrency at some point, right?
Well,
you have to convert it in some way.
Well, I don't know. Is that true? I don't know.
Well, in the case of this fraud, and by the way, they've just been charged. We should make sure we say alleged in front of all of these things. But the accusation is not that they hacked and stole the Bitcoin, which, by the way, was worth $71 million at the time of the hack in 2015 or 2016. Feds just seized over 4 billion of it now. But they're just accused of the money laundering. And according to the New York Times article, the funds were just sitting there for a while. They just kind of had their eye on it, and they looked when they pulled it out. So, I mean, it only has utility if you could do something with it. I suppose you could wash it in increasingly opaque assets.
Yeah, I think if we're going to try and make
buy some NFTs
more interesting, I think we might want to start the story a little bit further back, because remember, the first lot of proceeds went out through Alphabay, which was a dark market, which at the time they didn't realize that actually the feds had seized it. And it makes obvious sense, right? If you're the feds and you manage to get hold of one of these dark market servers, you wouldn't shut it down. You carry on running it and collect all of the information about everything that passes through it. So there's that aspect of the story. We haven't heard the whole end of that yet, which also fascinates me. But you're right. I mean, it seems strange because in one way you can see all of the transactions, so you can see exactly what's going on. But I think the issue is some of those transactions will go into places where you can't see what's going on. They'll go into these, it's noticeable. I mean, again, we probably
I do have a question from an infrastructure perspective. Obviously, the one thing that has characterized the crypto market, from the Mt. Gox days and so forth, our good friend Chris Skinner, for example, lost quite a bit of Bitcoin on the Mt. Gox hack. But Bitcoin has had this.
Aren't they going to get that back, though? I thought they were going to get that back.
I don't know.
I get mixed up about these things.
But my point is, if you look at the wallet infrastructure for the early Bitcoin stuff, and the early exchanges dealing with this stuff, it has been a problem. The hacks. Now, we obviously will evolve better mechanisms for security, but when we look at implementations of CBDC, do you think they're going to have the same issues that we see with the exchanges and the crypto wallets, or does the nature of centralization with the central banks issuing that provide an additional level of protection and security?
I actually think, Brett, and you probably think I'm just like really kind of reactionary, but I don't think it will be a problem for three reasons, really. So first of all, no sane central bank is going to allow completely anonymous digital currency. That will never happen. And no matter how much people whine and complain about, cash is anonymous and it's the right to be anonymous and all this sort of thing, they're comparing apples and oranges. Anonymous physical cash and anonymous digital cash are not the same thing at all. Anonymous digital cash is a hand grenade with the pin already pulled out, the moment it goes out. So that's never going to happen. So that's the first point. The second point is, I think in order for digital currency to function effectively in the mass market, it simply cannot work the way cryptocurrency works. It has to work in a vastly simpler, much more controlled way. And we all know what that's going to be because they're already doing it in China, which is it's going to be mobile phones and smart cards.
Right.
It's going to be tamper-resistant hardware so that it works offline. It's going to be certified devices, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole thing's going to be much more controlled and stable, which, again, I think is a good thing.
Well, how does this play into the a lot of the big virtual asset service providers have joined together to sign on for this new thing called trust, travel rule universal solution technology. And that's a little bit different than, the identity piece, a little bit different than what Brett was talking about. But where does that fit in?
Well, I'm probably a bad person to talk about that because I'm not wholly convinced that FATF and the travel rule is to the greater good of humanity. It's not absolutely obvious to me that my personal information should be packaged up and sent across the internet to other places when I'm trying to, send some money to a cousin or something like that. So it does sort of bother me a little bit.
Well, back up just a half a step, Dave, and talk about what are the proposed rules in that, and the pieces that you think might work or might not work.
The travel rule basically says, look, if I go to the bank and I send some money to Brett, somewhere in the plethora of Swift messages and databases and asynchronous transfer, somewhere in there has to be all of my personal details and all of Brett's personal details, so that it can be scanned for sanctions, compliance, and monitoring, and all this sort of thing.
And frankly, the wallet infrastructure is core here. I think one of the things we don't really fully comprehend as yet, I mean, Dave does, obviously, and JP, you probably do as well, is that the world is shifting away from, as we move from physical money modality and the proxies for that, which have been checks and like cash is there, obviously, but even credit cards, which allow us as a proxy to check our bank account details. The new mechanism for that's emerging globally is the wallet. Now we sometimes call them super apps and things like that, but this wallet infrastructure that emerges, I don't know how you have wallets that are interoperable, that work wherever you go, and especially completely digital, without having identity tied to that.
Well, I think I'm sort of more optimistic there, Brett, because I think we can see the rudiments of how to do this in the world of verifiable credentials and what's going on with double 360. So the idea that we're in the metaverse, we need to interact in some way. You need to know that I'm a resident of the United States. You're not allowed, let's say we want to do something and I have to be a resident of the United States to do it. So I could show you a US passport, which gives you all of my personal information and means that I'm now wide open to identity theft. Or I could present a verifiable credential, which says I am a US citizen, or I'm resident in the US or something. And then you would say, well, okay, that credential has to be digitally signed by somebody that I would trust, who's part of our trust framework. So if it's signed by JP, whatever, but if it's signed by Citibank, that's good enough. So I think by moving away from identification and moving toward credentials, I think we can see the way forward. And the idea that the wallet would become a holder of, these collections of credentials, I think that's intellectually consistent. So while the thing is, I guess I'm more optimistic going forward because I can see a way that we can balance these things up. And in a way that kind of reconnects banks with one of their traditional functions. So if Citibank know all this stuff about me, but they keep it all safely locked up in their vaults, and what I actually take round the metaverse with me is cryptographic proofs that Citibank have provided, which don't, and we'll use the simple example. Everybody uses I have a cryptographic proof provided by Citibank which says I'm over 21 years of age. It doesn't contain my age. It doesn't contain my date of birth. It's not a driver's license which gives away all these other facts about me. It's just a cryptographic proof which says we know this person's over 21. And there's a world of difference between asking me to present all of my personal data to take part in a transaction and asking me to present from my wallet the subset of credentials which are needed to enable the transaction. So so
but this requires digital identity frameworks. It requires us to identify who are the trusted organizations that can provide the cryptographic key or hash to access the required information. Right.
Our hope would obviously be that banks step up to the plate there, and you see things like the GAIN initiative.
A bank. I mean, even if banks step up to the plate, my argument here is you require this at a national level. It needs to be national identity infrastructure because telemedicine, access to education, access to financial services, the metaverse, all of this is going to require digital identity. The identity infrastructure we have in place can't transpose effectively into those worlds, right?
I understand what you're saying there, but if I was going to try to construct a more so I'd say, Visa isn't a national identity infrastructure. Visa wasn't created by the government, and I don't have a Visa card because I'm a US citizen or whatever. I can get off the plane anywhere in the world and use my Visa card, and it works fine. So you could easily imagine some sort of financial sector passport or something that, the banks can agree on SWIFT and they can agree on Visa, they can agree on all sorts of things. I mean, why the banks couldn't agree on some sort of financial identity thing, I don't know. I mean, in different countries, you might obtain that financial identity using different root documents. So in a sophisticated and advanced country, like Estonia or something, you use your online digital identity to get your financial services passport. In the UK, you, in the time-honored fashion, show up with copies of your gas bill and stand in line to do this. And in the US, you send in cancelled checks or something. I don't know how they do this, but the point is how you got the
you take your horse and your gun to a branch.
Right. So you see what I mean, but I want to be more optimistic about this. I think, reconnecting banks with their traditional function in the kind of trust and reputation area. Forget about the money, forget about the payments, forget about the stuff where the margins are going to zero. You're never going to be able to make a living out of sending digital currency backwards and forwards. You can't. But the other stuff,
but that's a good thing, right? Because it means that the intermediation aspect of this means there's no gaming of that. It becomes more transparent and more accessible.
Right. And if you, I mean, I was going to do it for a panel. I just realized this is radio, so it won't matter. But if I take my wallet that's next to me right now, if I open up my wallet and tip it out, there's no money in there. Everything that's in my wallet is credentials. It's my driver's license. It's my Visa card. It's my store cards, my loyalty cards. It's my train, season ticket thing. So everything that's in the wallet basically is already identity, and I think that's a really powerful way of thinking how this might work moving forwards. Like with banks providing the really important stuff that goes in the wallet, which is their identity. And if someone else can do a US dollar stable coin, it works fine. Let them. There's a we might want to reflect it, but there's a fantastic quote in the FT last weekend where they were talking about the regulation of stable coins. And the guy said, there's nothing inherently dodgy about stable coins, but there is something inherently dodgy about banking, which is why they have to have such strict regulations.
And people.
It's true.
I kind of agree with that. So it's like if people, if there are good rules around stable coins, about the reserves and this kind of thing, if it turns out Disney can do a better stable coin than Ford or Circle or Citibank, let them. Who cares, right? The important stuff in the wallet is the credentials.
Well, and even then, Dave, as you pointed out in your article, in Brazil, right, the crooks are holding people hostage and demanding that payment be sent via Pix, the instant payment network.
I felt a little bit naughty about writing that, but I couldn't resist writing it. So it's like, if you're a bank robber looking at modern technology, you've got you can either, management consultants would tell you've got to expand in scale or scope. And Brazil is a very advanced fintech nation, so there's a good example there. So there you have criminals doing both. So expanding in scale, I'm sure you read this story. The criminals blocked off a whole town and robbed all of the banks and drove off with people tied on top of their cars as human shields and all this sort of thing. So you can do scale. You can go in and robbing one bank doesn't get you enough, but you can go and rob all of the banks. Or you can expand in scope, and that's what they did. When Pix went live, Pix is the instant payment network, there was an immediate rise in instant kidnappings. So people would be kidnapped off the street and the criminals would demand the ransom payment instantly through the instant payment network to the point. You can look it up. It's turned into a real problem. So criminals will respond to new technology. That's what I was saying. Like, what would John Dillinger still be really walking into a bank? If John Dillinger, was he a master? If he was a master criminal, unlike Heather, who ordered the Walmart gift voucher, if he was a master criminal, then he'd go work for a bank, wouldn't he?
Well, the biggest frauds that have been conducted within the banking sector haven't actually been hacks. They've been internal issues, right? So you're right. The data bears that out. But
here's the big question, and we'll end on this. Will we have bank robberies in the metaverse?
I was making fun of this during the week, and I feel a bit bad picking on people, but I saw something about this bank branch in the metaverse, and there's this person standing in this, and this is so ridiculous because
Second Life Part 2.
Yeah, it is. And I went and got the picture of the ABN AMRO bank branch from 2006, which looked exactly the same, by the way. It's a bit like no one wants to go to a bank branch. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It's in metaverse. Like it's,
Amen, brother.
You go to a virtual bank branch and you stand in a virtual line with people and they get met by a virtual banker. No, it's like we live in a world of embedded finance and API. I don't want to go to a bank branch. It doesn't matter if it's beautiful colors and my bank teller is a pink dinosaur and I'm standing in line with Mark Zuckerberg in a skeleton suit. I'm not going to the bank branch. I don't care whether it's in the metaverse. So this is clearly, what this is, Brett? This is a vision of the future that you get when you ask people like me, i.e. technologists. If we want to see what the metaverse is going to look like, we should be talking to artists and creative people and imaginative people,
Absolutely.
Not people like me.
No. And not bankers. Well, Dave, thanks for joining us. For those of you listening, Dave will return at a show we've got planned for next month in March, which we're going to be talking about China's CBDC launch. Richard Turin will be joining us from China as well. So some good stuff there. Stay tuned. You're listening to Breaking Banks. We'll see you again shortly. That's it for this week. If you like the show, make sure to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, or share it with a friend, or share it on social media.
We'll see you again next week with more Breaking Banks.